Here's the 49ers report rundown for this episode of the show. What Kyle Shanahan must change. What Bill Belichick said about the Niners moving forward this year on the Pat McAfee Show. And I want to pose this question and have this conversation. Is Deebo Samuel cooked? Some concerning trends on that front. First, I want to say thank you to all of the faithful for supporting the program here. Yesterday for our Niners Seahawks watch party, week 11, it was humming. I wish the Niners came out with the victory, but we got to hang out with 124,000 of our friends worldwide, and we surpassed 150,000 subscribers as the 49ers Report continues to be the largest independently run Niners channel right here on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube right now, you got recommended this video, you were watching another video, this one popped up. I'm Chase Sr. This is the 49ers Report. We do live shows every week, watch parties, and we provide you with long-form content, short-form content on a daily basis. And anytime I'm in front of this camera, on this microphone, I want to give you Niners shows that are insightful, informative, entertaining, thought-provoking, where you have a voice. So I hope I encouraged you to lock us in and hit that subscribe button right now. Story number one and topic number one. Let's talk about Kyle Shanahan and what he has to change. I did a short yesterday. I put it up on our channel, put it up on my Instagram page, and I explained why Kyle Shanahan is having probably the worst year of his coaching career. But we have to get to a lot of the truths about Kyle Shanahan. Some good, some bad, and then hopefully we can meet in the middle as part of this conversation. And I can relay what I think Shanahan needs to change for him to get this team back on track, to get this offense playing at a good level, and for him to fix some of his weaknesses as a head coach. So the truth about Kyle Shanahan, the 49ers right now as an organization would not be where they are without him. For a long while, he has been one of the top coaches in the National Football League. And San Francisco has been on a long and sustainable run, 4 NFC Championship games in 5 years, 2 Super Bowls during that stretch. It's not just because of talent. It's because Kyle Shanahan is running this operation and running this organization. And he's had pretty mediocre quarterbacks play really well. I think Brock Purdy is an elite quarterback, but he's maximized that position. He's helped elevate and develop other players. His offenses have consistently been top 5, top 10 units, and he does put an emphasis on defense. Robert Saleh, D'Amico Ryans, great defensive minds for this organization who went elsewhere to become head coaches. And Kyle Shanahan, as an offensive mind, one of the more bright and creative offensive minds in football. Think about this. Since 2019, the 49ers are 54-29 with those 2 Super Bowl appearances and 4 NFC Championship game appearances during that time frame. They have been arguably the second most successful organization in the game behind the Kansas City Chiefs. Other fan bases, and probably almost every other fan base in the league, would take that type of run and would take Kyle Shanahan being their head coach. And going back to the quarterback point, he's had Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard, Trey Lance, Brock Purdy. He's won with a lot of those quarterbacks. That comes down to coaching and offensive system, and so he's maximized that position. Think about all of the skill players, though, who have gone on to have All-Pro and Pro Bowl seasons, some of which putting together borderline Hall of Fame careers, like George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey's Hall of Fame case becoming very interesting with what he's been able to do with San Francisco. Kyle Shanahan is also a great play designer and play caller. That's why San Francisco normally really good at picking up yards after the catch, separation, blown coverages for the defense, and that's why last year, for instance, the Niners, #1 red zone touchdown percentage in the NFL, #1 overall offense, and they were averaging nearly 30 points per game. But with all that being said, we all have flaws as human beings. We all have weaknesses, right? And Kyle Shanahan is not without his faults. He is stubborn. And he lacks accountability. And because he's stubborn, sometimes he can be slow to move off of his weaknesses and not admit his mistakes. And he's slow to make some required adjustments that's really cost him, and it's really cost this organization in some critical moments, in-game, in-season, throughout his tenure since he was hired back in 2017. And if you were to ask Washington fans about him, Cleveland fans about him, Atlanta fans about him, they would probably say some of the same things. really smart offensive mind, but he's not without some of his faults, and he can be stubborn, sticking with what he likes to do instead of hearing some outside voices to really help impact how he can make some necessary changes. And Kyle Shanahan has definitely lost a lot of big games, a lot of big leads in some of those games, and his teams really struggle to play from behind. And that's an indictment on Shanahan. If his teams do not jump out to an early lead, the offense isn't able to hop into the same rhythm. If they have to come back in games, their offense struggles a little bit. If the 49ers aren't able to establish the run, the pass game suffers. And Kyle Shanahan, time and time again, whether it's Steve Spagnuolo, Jim Schwartz, Brian Flores on Sunday against Mike McDonald, he has struggled against some top defensive minds. And with him approaching the team, he needs to take special teams more seriously. For the Niners to be as bad as they are with that critical third phase of the game this year and really since 2020, it's unacceptable. That's really frustrating because Shanahan has had this offense playing at a high level. He prioritizes defense, doesn't care about special teams. And it has cost the Niners in the Super Bowl. It's cost the Niners in playoff games. It's cost the Niners throughout the regular season. Yesterday was even another game in which there were special teams blunders. It's unacceptable, especially for a coach's son, a Super Bowl winning coach's son, and a guy who's had as much success as he's been able to have in his coaching career. This is also pretty alarming here. 125 coaches have had 40-plus regular season games decided by 7 points or fewer. 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan's .396 winning percentage in those games ranks 118th of 125. And that goes back to the original point that the Niners, when they don't jump out to an early lead and Kyle Shanahan can't dictate the pace, the flow, the momentum, the complexion of a game, when he has to come back, he's not the same play caller. I think he does press a little bit in those situations. But also, this is a truth about Kyle Shanahan. If the Niners were to fire him, he would have another job in a heartbeat. For instance, Andy Reid was in Philadelphia for 14 years. He got fired by Philadelphia after a bad year to end his campaign there in the city of brotherly love. The Kansas City Chiefs couldn't have hired him faster. And he might become the number one coaching commodity on the open market this offseason if he were to let go. If he were to be let go, excuse me. Now, this year he has dealt with a lot of adversity, and he hasn't really handled that well. I think he's also underperformed with a talented roster. I also think what we're seeing this year is what I feared might happen when we went into this year. This team is mentally fatigued. They've played a lot of football over the last 5 years. They've suffered some really heartbreaking losses. This is what a Super Bowl hangover looks like. Not fulfilling expectations, sloppy, undisciplined, not closing games out, not being consistent, shooting themselves in the foot. And Kyle Shanahan hasn't dealt with that well either. But to get to my original question, what does Kyle Shanahan have to do to be better? What type of adjustments does he have to make? These are the adjustments that Kyle Shanahan can start with, and these are the adjustments that he needs to make. Ted Wynn, great NFL analyst for The Athletic, does some phenomenal film breakdowns both on The Athletic and on X, brought something up which resurfaced yesterday when Brock Purdy had to throw hot on that third down to Jawan Jennings well short of the sticks. And it has to do with a protection issue within this offense. And Ted Wynn did a really good job of breaking down Kyle Shanahan's offensive philosophy and the system. So let's dive in. I'm highlighting a very small weak point for the 49ers that hardly affects the offense overall, but does affect it against heavy pressure defenses and often at critical junctures of the game. Coach Kyle Shanahan doesn't want his quarterbacks bogged down with protections and constantly worrying about getting into the perfect protection. He has answers built into his passing concepts for the quarterback in case of blitzes called hot routes. They're simply short routes the quarterback can go to when there's a blitz that the offensive line can't pick up. Against the Buccaneers, Brock Purdy was 12 of 14 for 200 yards with 1 touchdown against the blitz. Purdy will sometimes ignore his hot route and wait for a route to develop if he thinks that he can get rid of the ball before the free rusher gets to him. He's been doing more of that this season. An issue this season that we have seen, though, with that thought process is that Kyle Shanahan doesn't want his quarterbacks to overthink, audible, change the protection at the line of scrimmage. So he has answers built into the play. But this year, he hasn't had the answers built into the play, and the answers haven't been there. And that's a big reason why this Niners team has struggled. And Brock Purdy throwing hot hurt the Niners on Sunday against Seattle when a first down could have iced the game. And San Francisco couldn't move the football down the field to ice the game. Instead, they gave the rock back to Geno Smith, 80 yards downfield, 13-yard touchdown, game over, blouses. Niners lost their third divisional game this year when they've had a lead inside 2 minutes. Here's what Tom Brady had to say about all of this. In critical situations, you never want to be forced into a hot throw if you're an offense. But, against the 49ers, if you bring the linebacker and nickel to that side, he's going to be free. And if you can't block that pressure, you're going to be stuck throwing short of the sticks. What happened yesterday? Brock Purdy threw short of the sticks, and the Niners had to punt. Kurt Benkert, he was with this Niners team a few years ago, and on the roster, in the quarterback room, he knows this offense. So for him to say this inside the building, it's pretty telling. The 49ers offense doesn't adjust protections, they just throw hot. Meaning, they don't change the offensive line protections. When a blitz comes, Purdy throws to the hot guy. Oftentimes, it's short of the sticks. It cost them in the Super Bowl. Other teams know this, and they can force their hand in critical situations, just like we saw in the Super Bowl last year. It's mind-blowing stuff that a simple flipper would fix. And so all Kyle Shanahan has to do is make a slight adjustment to fix this. Furthermore, from Benkert, there's a happy medium in my opinion. Some plays do not need a protection change, and it makes sense to go fast and throw hot. While on critical downs, you should only be calling the best play possible, and there should be a few tools for every quarterback to get the edges protected the right way. This is what Jordan Love does so well on third downs, especially in the red zone. During my time in San Francisco, this was the number one thing that made no sense to me. If there is a clear and easy answer, why not empower your quarterback to get you into the best protection? This stems back to Shanahan's history as a receiver, in my opinion, instead of seeing it through the lens of a quarterback. So that is very well said from Kurt Benkert. Kyle Shanahan's a great offensive mind. He knows that. Kyle Shanahan has had some of the top offensive minds in the game, but he's not doing some of these little things that are fixable that can help this Niners offense come up with fixes. And Kyle Shanahan's having a rough year. This is a key adjustment that he needs to make. Other things that I think Shanahan must fix. Let Purdy command more at the line of scrimmage. He has the football IQ in order to do that. Give him a little bit more of a leash. Kyle Shanahan also has to come up with play calls and play designs to help wide receivers create yak and create separation. The Niners this year are last in separation at the catch point. They were middle of the pack last year. That's a big difference. And in turn, very, very stressful throws for Brock Purdy. The Niners also have to figure out their red zone problems. Number 1, red zone touchdown percentage last year. Number 26 this season. I want to see a balanced run game. Christian McCaffrey's not right. He played as many snaps yesterday as he did in any game last year. And the one game where he played more snaps last year went into overtime. He doesn't have the burst. He doesn't have the explosion. He's working his way off of bilateral Achilles tendonitis. Jordan Mason, before McCaffrey came back, was top 5 in rushing yards. He's gotten less than 5 carries the last 2 games. One against Tampa Bay. He may have had just one against Seattle. What are we doing? And then, of course, game management, special teams, and prioritizing the offensive line. Kyle Shanahan has to change his philosophy on that. So what do you think? Will Shanahan ever win a Super Bowl with the San Francisco 49ers? Type W for win, L for he will never. L stands for lose. Coming up next, what Bill Belichick said about the Niners, and is Deebo Samuel cooked? Stay tuned for that. Still plenty more to get to. But first, be sure to sign up with Prize Picks, the best daily fantasy sports app in the game. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks right now. When you play $5, you get $50 instantly. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Some Monday Night Football selections that we like: CeeDee Lamb and Tank Dell, more than a half combined touchdown. Brandon Aubrey, more than an 8.5 fantasy score. Cowboys going to struggle to find the end zone. Aubrey is one of the best field goal kickers in the game, if not the best. And then Nico Collins is back, a big weapon for C.J. Stroud. He finds the end zone, more than a half rushing and receiving touchdown. Makes game day so much more fun. Daily fantasy sports made easy. You pick 2 or more players. You choose more or less on their projected stat lines. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. What Bill Belichick said about the San Francisco 49ers. Let's get to that next. And I thought he made a really, really good point. He was on the Pat McAfee Show. He was asked about the struggling Niners. Here's what he said. So many games in this league are so close. They come down to a play or two. You win them one year, you lose them the next year, and you think the gap is an ocean, and it really isn't. It's just a handful of plays. But look, in the end, their season will be defined on what happens in the last 6 games of the year. The 49ers are close enough to be in it, and they're going to have to play their best football going forward. You look at teams like Tampa Bay, the Giants, and their Super Bowls. Those teams barely got into the playoffs. They barely had a winning record. Then they played their best football when it mattered. The 49ers are capable of doing that. I love the ocean line from Bill Belichick. Because the 49ers have lost 3 divisional games while having a lead inside 2 minutes, all of those defeats have been ugly. They've been crushing. They've been soul-crushing, right? And because of the ugly nature of those losses, it feels like the gap is an ocean because they are inexplicable, avoidable losses. When in reality, if the Niners close those games out, and everybody's to blame, front office, coaching staff, the players, the system, the Niners could be 8-2. If the Niners won those 3 games, they'd be 8-2. And an 8-2 record would have them in the number 2 spot or the number 3 spot in the NFC playoff picture. Instead, they've dropped 3 of those games, and they are 5-5. And right now, in the hunt, not even a wild card team, and I don't think the NFC West will get 2 teams inside the NFL playoffs. That's why I always like to say, NFL games are decided on the margins, and those margins are razor thin. Let's round out with this. Is Deebo Samuel cooked? He looks average. He has played average. He can't separate like he usually does or break tackles at the same rate that he's been able to throughout his career. As since he got drafted in 2019, he was deemed the Yak King. And Deebo Samuel looks like a shell of himself. With Brandon Ayuk out for the year, you were hoping that Deebo Samuel was going to be able to step up and maybe give us a glimpse of that 2021 All-Pro Deebo Samuel who put the team on his back during that stretch run just to get the Niners into the playoffs. And I think it's very evident that Deebo isn't the same player, and his best days might be behind him when you look at his yards per carry by season. As a rookie, 11.4 yards per carry. In 2020, only played 7 games, 3.3 yards per tote. His All-Pro season, 59 carries, 365 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6.2 yards per carry. He was a first-team All-Pro. Then he signed that contract extension. In 2022, 5.5 yards per carry. In 2023, 6.1. This year in 2024, Deebo Samuel is averaging a career-worst 2.9 yards per carry. The speed isn't there. The acceleration isn't there. He's not able to break tackles like he normally has throughout his career, and he's on pace for having a down year. Going into Week 12, Deebo only has 33 catches for 490 yards and 2 total touchdowns. He has not been the same player since 2021, and since the 49ers signed him to that contract extension, he has been a disappointment for this team. He was a non-factor against the Seattle Seahawks. A non-factor. You're without Ayuk. You're without George Kittle. You need Deebo Samuel to come up huge. He was nowhere to be found. And his route on that huge play that got batted down at the line of scrimmage, not a great throw from Purdy. His sight line was affected, but Deebo didn't run a crisp route on that play either. So what say you? Is Deebo washed? With what I've seen with my eyes, doesn't look the same. Y for yes, N for no. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. Don't forget to subscribe.